The group Labour Women's Declaration were denied a stand at the party's conference in Liverpool this week. Labour say applications for the conference were oversubscribed and that there is no question of the gender-critical group being banned. But with me to discuss this, I have Bronwen Davies, a founding member of the Labour Women's Declaration group, and Dr. Joo-Min Zhu, a Labour Party member who was at the conference this week and is also a supporter of the group. Thank you both for joining me. Bronwen, I want to come to you first and ask a bit about what the Labour Women's Declaration actually is.
Right. Well, it was drawn up in 2019, just before the general election. 12 women from all over the UK got together, decided we need something to campaign about. And so we drew up the declaration. It's got 7 principles. It's very focused on the law. So the first statement, the first principle is a statement that women are oppressed and discriminated against because of our sex. But the second principle draws attention to the fact that we have the right to, as everybody does, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and freedom of belief. And that, as you know, is based on the UN Convention of Human Rights. And then we go on, the third principle is women should be able to discuss issues, policies which affect them without abuse, harassment or intimidation.
Well, all of this sounds incredibly reasonable. And
thank you.
You would wonder why this would be in any way contentious or why Labour would deny you a stand at the conference.
Yes, you would. The reason that we were given for... We applied for... We've been in existence as an organisation around the Declaration now for nearly 3 years. The Declaration is online. It's got... there were 300 founding signatories, and we've gathered another 7,500 signatories since then. And we continue to gather signatures at the rate of about 7 a day on average. But we'd applied this year for a stall in good time. We'd held a fringe meeting last year, and we had an acknowledgement. We were told it would need to be decided by the business board. But actually, we thought that was naively just a rubber stamping issue.
Yes.
We'd I think even been given an idea of where the stand would be.
Yes. Oh, so it was all in place. It was all going to happen.
We thought so. And we, made plans accordingly because we were delighted at
what do you think happened?
Prospect.
Why do you think it didn't go through?
Well, that's an interesting question. The business board, when it finally met, said it was for commercial reasons, as if our money somehow wasn't good enough. But we don't know.
So, if I can come to you, Dr. Zhu, you're a Labour Party member, and you obviously support what the Labour Women's Declaration is doing.
Yes.
Why do you think it's so important?
I came to know this issue when 2 years ago J.K. Rowling said sex is real. I heard this. I think, well, what is the argument? Of course sex is real. So I start to search why is there such an argument about it. And I find that there's this new ideology, the gender ideology, saying that your internal feeling of your gender identity should replace your biological sex in important documents. I feel that is very wrong. People often talk about toilet. Toilet is the smallest issue because for gender identity to replace biological sex, it has important implication in issues like sports.
Yes,
right?
Of course.
So now there's a biological male cannot compete in women's sports games, which I feel is unfair to women. And then also what happens in women's prison, women's domestic violence shelters, women's hospital ward. There are biological men in those women's units. This affects women's safety in all this ground, in all these spaces.
And why do you think that the Labour Party can't see, what you're outlining there seems very clear to me, that women's rights often, in some circumstances, do depend on the preservation or a recognition of sex differences. Why is that so difficult for some people high up in the Labour Party to grasp?
I don't entirely know. You need to ask them. But I think that the common line I have been told that trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people are what they say they are. I find that is you are replacing that a self-proclaim to replace the biological reality. That is quite dangerous.
Bronwen Davies, can I bring you in on that? Because, you know, a lot of people will say, well, any objections to self-ID must be coming from a place of hate or transphobia or this kind of thing. How would you respond to that?
Well, like many people, I don't think that saying sex is real and that there are two sexes, male and female, is anything other than common sense. It is not transphobic. Transphobic means a hatred of trans people. And just saying that sex is real, it isn't transphobic. To me, sex is one thing and gender identity is something completely different. Not everybody feels they need a gender identity. But if you look at the Equality Act, which is also referenced in the Labour Women's Declaration, there are a number of groups that are protected against discrimination, and women are protected on the grounds of sex. Trans people are protected on the grounds of gender reassignment. So we both have the same, both groups have the same protection.
Do you think that Labour is losing its way on this? I mean, we've had Rosie Duffield has obviously spoken out, and she received threats and all sorts of things for doing so. She said this year that if Eddie Izzard were to be on the all-female shortlist for a place, she would leave the Labour Party. But she seems to be an outlier.
Well, I don't know that that's quite true. It was very interesting being at Labour Party conference this year compared with a year ago. I was at both. And there has been a real shift during that time. I think you talk about the leadership and people in senior positions. We are being listened to, very much so. But I think there's more listening that needs to be happening and further to go. We're getting more support. Brave MPs like those that spoke at our Fringe meeting, which was chaired by one of the Labour MPs, Tonya Antoniazzi. Diana Johnson was one of the speakers. Rosie Duffield was in the audience and contributed from the floor. But those are just the tip of the iceberg. We do have more support.
Dr. Zhu, do you feel the same way? Do you think the Labour Party is in danger of losing voters if it doesn't resolve this issue?
This is certainly a contentious issue, but I think Labour is improving on this issue. Last year, I have been there as an attendee. That I saw that they have to keep the location secret last year and this year. However, this year, the list of the fringe event of Labour Women's Declaration is listed on the official party, the conference book.
But didn't get a stall, though.
Didn't get a stall.
Right.
But I see some improvement.
Sort of
improvement. So I hope next year they would have a stand and enlisted like all the other socialist societies.
But they have, I mean, we had this last year with LGB Alliance, for instance. LGB Alliance is non-partisan, right? And they were denied a stall as well. So, I mean,
they were.
You know, is it not fair to say that there is a problem? And I accept that this is a problem in Tories as well. But I think with Labour it's particularly pronounced.
I don't know about that. I think it is a cross-party issue. We work very closely, Labour Women's Declaration works very closely with groups in other political parties.
Yeah.
And the other interesting point for me is that it's not an issue simply of the right or the left within the Labour Party. The Labour Party is a broad church, but women right across the spectrum are affected by this. Women right, from Open Labour to Momentum, have been abused, harassed, intimidated, all those things, and this isn't acceptable. And women are not prepared to put up with it. We will change things because it's also discriminatory.
And before we finish, can you let the viewers know where can they find out more about the Labour Women's Declaration?
Oh, well, as I said, it is online. If you Google Labour Women's Declaration, it's in the form of a petition. And if you feel like signing it when you've read it, you're able to do that. You're also able to leave comments. Could I read you a recent comment?
You may.
This is from Anonymous. You can put your name. But on September the 29th, it just said, left-wing Labour voter my entire life, and the promotion of gender ideology and the suppression of women's views means I will struggle to vote Labour. Thank you to the brave women standing up to this. I mean, this gives us great heart.
Well, that is encouraging. Well, thank you both very much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.